Can refusing to eat become more powerful than an army? For most people, fasting is about health, discipline, or spiritual practice. But for Mahatma Gandhi, it was something much greater. He transformed fasting into a weapon, an act of resistance that shook empires and inspired millions. In this story, we'll explore how Gandhi used the silence of his empty plate as a thunderous voice against injustice, and why his hunger strikes became one of the most unique strategies in the history of political struggle. To understand Gandhi's use of fasting, we need to step back into India in the early 20th century. At that time, India was under British colonial rule. The empire controlled politics, the economy, and even the smallest details of people's lives. Poverty was widespread, industries were exploited, and millions of Indians longed for freedom. Amid this struggle, Gandhi rose as a leader, not with weapons or armies, but with ideas. He preached ahimsa, or nonviolence, and satyagraha, which means holding on to truth. His philosophy rejected hatred and instead relied on moral strength. But how could an unarmed man fight one of the strongest empires in the world? For Gandhi, the answer was to turn weakness into strength. Fasting became a tool that expressed sacrifice, discipline, and moral pressure all at once. Before fasting became a political weapon, it was first a part of Gandhi's own spiritual discipline. From a young age, he was influenced by Indian traditions of self-restraint, simplicity, and purification. He believed that controlling one's body was essential for controlling one's mind. For Gandhi, fasting was never just about abstaining from food. It was a way to cleanse the body and strengthen the spirit. He lived a remarkably austere lifestyle, eating a vegetarian diet, often prepared with the simplest ingredients, wearing handmade clothes, and rejecting excess or luxury. This personal practice made his public fasts all the more powerful. People knew he was not staging a performance. Gandhi had already trained himself in restraint, so when he stopped eating in protest, it carried deep authenticity. His hunger strikes were not a stunt, they were a continuation of his life philosophy. When Gandhi stepped into the political arena, he discovered that fasting could do more than purify the soul, it could challenge injustice. Unlike speeches, protests, or petitions, a hunger strike could not be ignored. The image of a frail man, deliberately choosing to risk his own life, created immense moral pressure on both his followers and his opponents. The strategy was simple yet profound. Violence invites retaliation, but self-inflicted suffering exposes injustice without harming others. By refusing food, Gandhi forced people to confront a question: was their cause worth the life of a man who harmed no one? His fasts had multiple layers of impact. They called attention to specific injustices, unified his supporters under a common emotional banner, and placed colonial authorities in a moral dilemma. If Gandhi died during a fast, the British would face outrage not only in India, but around the world. Through this, fasting became not an act of weakness, but a weapon of unparalleled strength, an act of resistance where silence and sacrifice spoke louder than violence ever could. The 1918 Ahmedabad fast. One of Gandhi's earliest political fasts took place during a strike by textile workers in Ahmedabad. The workers demanded fair wages, but negotiations stalled. Gandhi stepped in, not as a politician above them, but as a fellow struggler. When talks failed, he began fasting to pressure both sides to find a just solution. His sacrifice gave moral weight to the workers' cause, and eventually, the employers agreed to their demands. The 1932 Yerwada Prison fast. Perhaps his most famous fast occurred in 1932 while he was imprisoned in Yerwada jail. The British had introduced a plan to create separate political electorates for the so-called untouchables, a move that Gandhi believed would permanently divide Indian society. In protest, he began a fast unto death. The nation was gripped with anxiety. Would they allow their beloved leader to die? Under pressure, political leaders reached the Pune Pact, which ended the separate electorates and became a turning point in India's fight for unity. The 1943 fast during World War II. During World War II, Gandhi was again imprisoned for demanding Britain grant India independence. To protest his detention and highlight the injustice of colonial rule, he fasted once more. At the time, his health was fragile, and his possible death in prison could have sparked massive unrest. The British, already struggling with a global war, found themselves cornered by the moral and political consequences of his protest. Every time Gandhi fasted, it sent shockwaves through both Indian society and the British colonial government. His protests created a dilemma that no empire could easily solve. For the British rulers, Gandhi's fasts were a nightmare. If they ignored him and he died, they risked unleashing massive uprisings across India. Yet if they gave in to his demands, they appeared weak in the face of a single unarmed man. Either way, the balance of power shifted against them. For ordinary Indians, Gandhi's fasts were deeply personal. His willingness to suffer for others inspired unity among communities that were often divided by religion, class, or caste. People who might not have agreed on politics could rally around the sight of their leader refusing food until justice was served. His sacrifice made the independence movement feel not only political, but moral and spiritual. Internationally, his hunger strikes attracted attention as well. Newspapers around the world reported on Gandhi's fragile body and unshakable will, portraying him as a living symbol of nonviolent resistance. His struggle put India's independence on the global stage in a way that no battlefield could. While Gandhi's hunger strikes were admired by millions, they were not without criticism. Some people argued that his fasts were less about moral strength and more about emotional blackmail. By threatening his own life, critics said, Gandhi forced others into making decisions they might not have chosen freely. Political opponents sometimes accused him of manipulating the public. They believed his fasts placed unbearable pressure on leaders who had to choose between compromise or being seen as responsible for Gandhi's death. Even some allies worried that his methods gave too much weight to individual sacrifice rather than broader political strategy. And yet, even his critics could not deny the results. Gandhi's fasting had a profound psychological effect on rulers, on society, and on the world. Whether viewed as moral courage or moral coercion, his hunger strikes shifted the balance of power without a single weapon being raised. Gandhi's use of fasting left a legacy that extended far beyond India's independence. His hunger strikes showed the world that resistance did not always require violence or armies. Sometimes, the greatest force came from self-control and moral conviction. His methods inspired future generations of leaders across the globe. Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States, Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and Cesar Chavez in the labor movement all drew lessons from Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance. The idea that one person's sacrifice could awaken the conscience of an entire nation became a blueprint for social change. Even today, hunger strikes remain a form of protest around the world. Activists use them to highlight injustice when other methods fail, echoing the spirit of Gandhi's original vision. While not every fast has the same impact, the image of a person willingly enduring suffering for justice still resonates deeply. Gandhi proved that power is not only measured in weapons or wealth, but in the courage to suffer for truth. His fasts transformed silence into a voice that still speaks across history. Gandhi's fasting was not an act of weakness, it was a strategic, moral, and deeply personal weapon. Through his hunger strikes, he challenged injustice, united a nation, and forced even powerful empires to confront their conscience. His approach reminds us that strength is not always measured by force, but by the courage to act in alignment with one's principles, even when the cost is personal. Gandhi's empty plate became louder than any speech, more powerful than any army, an enduring proof that moral conviction can change the world. In the end, Gandhi's greatest battle was not against soldiers or laws, but against apathy and injustice, and he won it, one fast at a time.